If you've entered the USA on a K-1 visa and are applying for adjustment of status, I thought I'd create a step-by-step tutorial of absolutely everything you need to file for adjustment of status with USCIS, which includes the new up-to-date filing fees to obtain your green card. In this video, I want to cover so much information so that you can easily submit your application correctly and accurately to avoid receiving a request for evidence or worse, a rejection for your application. Hopefully, this video will cover everything you need from start to finish in order to submit your adjustment of status application with USCIS. I'll include chapters in the description box so you can skip to the relevant part you wish to watch. As USCIS only provides basic guidelines and there is no specific method of assembling the adjustment of status packet, we did a lot of research in order to make sure we covered everything that would be required. I'm going to go through our actual document that we submitted, and in this video, I'll cover how to assemble the entire packet and mail it off. We initially struggled trying to find the perfect order to organize it all, so I truly hope that this helps. I'll cover everything to include as well as a checklist for you to use. How to fill out all the difficult parts of the forms, even the bits that we struggled on. I'll cover Form I-485, Adjustment of Status, Form I-864, Affidavit of Support, Form I-765, Work Authorization, so you can begin working in the USA, as well as Form I-131, Travel Authorization, so that you can travel out of the US and enter back in. I'll also cover all the proof or evidence and additional documents that you need to include, plus show you all the cover letters you need and how to file concurrently and pay. I'll also show you where to specifically mail your application, as where you send your application will depend on which state you reside in the US. And I'll include as many tips as I can throughout the video to ensure your application is approved successfully. Just as a note, this is how we filled out the application as two individuals who have never been married before. Neither of us have children nor any criminal records, so you may want to adjust your form and documents that you are submitting accordingly if anything different applies to you. As you can see, we assembled our packet into 3 documents, which we submitted together as one large document. We didn't use separate folders or create anything fancy with different folders. We just wanted to keep our packet as simple as possible for USCIS, and therefore printed title pages and used easily removable binder clips. We created 3 title pages, each labeled with the relevant form title, as well as the name and A number of the applicant, as you can see on the screen. According to the guidelines, it's useful to list the applicant's name and A number on the pages in case they get lost or misplaced, which is why we made sure we included it on every single page that we submitted. Your A number can be found here on your NOAA 2 letter. At any point throughout the video, please feel free to take screenshots and save any pages that you may find useful for your own packet. Each document packet does include a check made payable to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, as well as 2 passport photos of the applicant, and I'll go over this towards the end of the video. I'll start with Form I-485, which is the Adjustment of Status packet, which allows you to obtain your green card. This form is mandatory, but the other 2 forms are optional. But you must complete this form and submit it to USCIS if you wish to live in the USA legally. This is our exact completed application. So I'll go through this now in order, page by page, so you can use it as a reference when compiling your own packet. With this form, you're going to include a check made payable to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security for $1,440, as well as 2 passport photos of the beneficiary applicant. The next page is our cover letter. Feel free to screenshot this and amend this accordingly. But this contains absolutely everything that you need to include for the adjustment of status packet, and is written with the correct formatting USCIS mentions in their guidelines. We ensured the words I-485 cover letter were visible in the left-hand corner. On the right-hand corner, you'll write the applicant's name, A number, address, and contact information, as well as today's date. We then included the USCIS mailing address we sent our application to. To find out where to mail your application, you're going to go onto the USCIS website and find the lockbox filing location chart for family-based forms. Here, they provide a list of addresses depending on which state you're based in. So, for example, we mailed our form via U.S. Postal Service to the Chicago lockbox because we're based in Florida. Next, we highlighted that this is the original submission of Form I-485 to adjust status of an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. We stated, here is a list of contents included in the order which they appear in the packet. As an FYI, USCIS does prefer the check at the front of the packet. As you can see, we also included the Form I-864 in this contents page, as it is required to be submitted with the I-485 form as proof that your spouse can financially support you. And it includes its own list of supporting evidence. Furthermore, there is a section for additional documents which shows proof of our marriage, including photos and joint documents together. Please feel free to screenshot this page for you to use as your own cover letter. We really took a lot of care when writing this cover letter in ensuring we listed every item that is required, as well as providing detail to what we're including. At the bottom of the page, we sign this page by the applicant. Next, we have the G1145 form, which is downloadable on the USCIS website. By completing this form, it allows you to receive notifications by text and email in regards to your application. We received a text from USCIS when our application was received by USCIS. Here is page 1 of the I-485 application. Feel free to screenshot any of these pages to help you fill out the form, and I'll highlight any key aspects which may help you out. On this page and every page, you'll need to include your A number. This can be found here on your NOAA 2. This form is predominantly asking for the beneficiary's information, so in part 1, you'll start inputting information of the applicant who is the beneficiary. If you're wondering what name to put in box 1A, in which it asks for your last name, you can put your married last name, and then in the below section, you can use other names used. You would put your old or maiden last name in box 2A, if applicable. On page 2, don't forget to include the A number once again in the top right-hand corner. It needs to be filled out on every single page of this form. Most of the information required on this form is pretty simple and basic. I highly recommend getting a social security number after entering the USA. You can visit your local social security office with your I-94 record and passport and apply for one. Having a social security number will allow you to open a bank account, for example. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for USCIS to apply on your behalf and issue you a social security card. We obtained a social security number before filling out this form, so in question 14, we ticked yes. But if you have never been issued a social security card, you're going to select no to question 14. For questions 16 and 17, you can select yes for both whether you have a social security card or not. For question 18, you'll include your passport number, which can be found on your passport page. You can write NA for travel document number. Question 20 is the expiration date of your passport. Question 21 asks the country that issued your passport. In our case, it's United Kingdom. And question 22 is your K1 visa number, which can be found here. You'll then enter the city, state, and date where you entered the USA. On page 3, you're going to select box 25A and write K1 fiancé visa. For question 26A, it asks for your I-94 arrival departure record number. To locate this, you're going to log on to the I-94 CBP website and click Get Most Recent I-94. Once you fill out this form, you'll see your admission record number here. So you type this number into box 26A. For 26B, it'll ask your expiration date of authorized stay. And this can be found on your I-94 here, where it states admit until date. For 26C, you're going to type in K1, and for box 27, you'll type in K1 visa holder. In part 2, on this page, you'll check box 1A, family-based person admitted to the United States as a fiancé of a U.S. citizen, form I-129F, K1 immigrant. Page 4 is fairly simple, as you can see. On the right-hand column, it asks for your receipt number, and this can be found on your NOAA 1, beginning with the letters WAC. Page 5 asks for your address history and employment history. For address 1, you'll be writing the address you're living in the USA. And we just wrote the from date as the same date we entered the USA. Page 6 is further information about the beneficiary, including information about your parents. On page 7, in part 5, you're going to select married as your marital status. On the right-hand column, it asks how many times have you been married. In our case, this is our first marriage and the beneficiary's first marriage, so we selected 1. The next section asks information about your current marriage. And here, you're going to enter the petitioner's information as they are your current spouse. In box 10, make sure to check the no box as your current spouse is not applying with you for a green card, considering they are already a U.S. citizen. Page 8 relates to previous marriages and information about any children. As this doesn't apply to us, we did not fill out this section. On page 9, part 7 relates to the beneficiary's biographic information. And on part 8, we selected no and left this section as it does not apply to us. Here is page 10. I'd suggest reading this and filling it out in regards to what applies to you. But we checked no as none of these apply to us. We did the same with page 11. Once again, page 12 is just a continuation. On page 13, question 61, it asks, are you subject to the public charge ground of inadmissibility under INA section 212A4? And you're going to check the yes box. A lot of applicants get an RFE for checking no, so make sure you check the yes box. Question 62 asks for the size of your household. As it's just the 2 of us, we wrote the number 2. Then 63 and 64 ask for your household income and value of household assets. And we based our answer on myself, the U.S. petitioner, as it was asking for a household income. Page 14 asks a similar question on question 65. Question 66 is about the beneficiary again. Page 15 is again a lot of yes or no boxes, as you can see here. There are no trick questions. As my beneficiary has no illegal entries or violations, we check no to everything. On page 16, you'll enter the applicant's telephone number and email address. Page 17 is incredibly important. Remember to sign this application by hand, as I've seen a lot of people receive RFEs for not signing their application. And also include the date too. Page 18 is in regards to a preparer, so we left this blank as it doesn't apply to us, considering that we filled out this entire form by ourselves. Page 9 is a continuation. Leave part 13 blank, as this is for USCIS to use. The final page, which is page 20, is for additional information should you need it. Again, just remember to include your name and a number on the form. And that's the entire form complete. Now we move to supporting evidence that you need to provide. And once again, this is just a continuation of everything in order of what we compiled together. First is the applicant's passport page. On the top of every page, we included his name and a number, as well as a short title. So for example, copy of passport biographic page. Next is the beneficiary's birth certificate. And of course, these are all just scanned copies, and we stated this in the title as USCIS does not require the original documents. Next is a copy of his social security card. We then included a copy of the I-94, which was downloaded from the official I-94 CBP website. Again, all these documents are required by USCIS along with the I-485 form as supporting evidence. We then have a copy of the K-1 visa with a stamp of admission. On the next page is our copy of the NOAA 2, followed along by the NOAA 1. Next is a copy of a K-1 FTP NVC letter for the I-129F petition. We then included a certified copy of the marriage certificate. Again, this is essential to include within your application. So we made sure that we got multiple certified copies of our marriage certificate, as we knew that we'd need to submit this as well as use it for other things, such as name changes or merging bank accounts. Next, we included photos from our wedding ceremony and stated the date on the title too. We then included a copy of the DS3025 vaccination documentation worksheet, and this is what was provided after undertaking a medical exam back in my beneficiary's home country. If you don't have this form, you'll need to fill out the I-693 Report of Immigration, Medical Examination, and Vaccination Record form. Here's part 2 of that form. We then included a cover letter simply stating that here is proof that we've already undertaken a medical exam and that another one is not required according to USCIS guidelines. Feel free to screenshot this for you to use as your own. The next page is our cover page for the I-864 Affidavit of Support form. Again, this is just a continuation of our adjustment of status packet, considering that proof of financial support is a requirement. We included the principal applicant's A number and name on this form too, even though this form is predominantly filled out by the petitioner, U.S. citizen. Similarly to the previous cover letter, we labeled the title in bold on the top left-hand corner and added the petitioner's contact information on the right-hand side. Feel free to take a screenshot of this cover letter or copy aspects as you need. In summary, it states that we're providing Form I-864 and I, as the petitioner, am willing and able to financially support my husband. The supporting documents are mandatory and we've listed everything that we're including. Once again, we've also signed at the bottom of the page. Here we have page 1 of the form. And this form is predominantly filled out by the petitioner, U.S. citizen. All the information required is fairly basic. Part 1 asks for the petitioner's information and you'll check box 1A. Part 2 asks for the beneficiary's information. You can see we've added sticky tabs at the bottom of these pages. We didn't add any on any other parts of the form, but we decided to just add some labels on the bottom to help USCIS locate the relevant documents, as some of the financial documents we were providing, such as the tax return printouts, were quite thick and lengthy in pages. Here is page 2 of our application should you wish to copy it. For part 3, question 1, you'll be checking the yes box. As it states, you're sponsoring the applicant you've just mentioned in part 2 on the previous page. On page 3, on the top left corner of question 29, you're going to enter the number of immigrants that you are sponsoring. In our case, this is just 1, as it's my husband that I'm sponsoring. For part 4, it's asking for the petitioner's information. On page 4, you're going to fill out part 5 as shown if it's just you and your spouse. The household size should add up to the number 2. Of course, this is based on our circumstances, as this is just the 2 of us married with no children. Just as a warning, the form is incredibly temperamental, and we had issues with the formatting on this part. So just make sure that your household size is added up correctly in the total. So I just wanted to warn you in advance so that you're aware. Part 6 asks for the petitioner's employment information. And for question 8, within part 6, you'll type in your beneficiary's name and type spouse for the relationship status. On page 5, part 6, we filled out my income on question 20, left question 21 blank, and checked the box for question 22, and wrote my beneficiary's name, stating we do not need to complete Form I-864A. The next section asks for tax return information, and you'll need to submit supporting documents, which I'll show you. Everyone's financial situation is different, so just bear in mind that this is just how we filled out our application and wanted to show you to use as a guideline in the event that you're struggling on any questions. As we met the federal poverty guidelines for income requirements, we were not required to complete Part 7 on the right-hand column. Here is page 6 of our form. Page 7 is asking for the sponsor's contact information, so that's the U.S. citizen's contact information. Page 8 requires the sponsor's signature, so don't forget to sign by hand, as USCIS will reject the application if it is not signed. Part 9 asks for the preparer's information. However, as we're filling out this form by ourselves, we can leave that blank. Page 10 is available for any additional space that you may need. We then included 1040s for the past 3 years, 2023, 2022, and 2021. On each page, we wrote the petitioner's name, and titled the form, even though it's clearly visible that it's the 1040 tax return. Next, we included the IRS tax transcripts for the past 3 years and labeled each document relevantly. We then included W-2s for the past 3 years. The next document was a letter from my employer verifying my employment, stating my salary, position, hire date, and employee status. We tried to provide as much information and documentation as we could, as we wanted to avoid receiving a request for evidence. So we found it better to include as much relevant information as we could rather than solely include the bare minimum. We then included pay stubs from the past 6 months. Then we included a letter from my bank stating the opening date of the account, total amount deposited, and also the present balance. We included the petitioner's passport biographic information, and titled it Proof of U.S. Sponsors U.S. Citizenship. Our aim was just to make everything as easy as possible for USCIS to read and acknowledge. I also included a copy of my birth certificate. Next, we included a couple of additional documents to support our overall adjustment of status packet, which is mainly just proof of your relationship. Again, this section is included in the same packet and just a continuation of pages of paper in one big pile of paper. We haven't separated these into different envelopes or folders, as every piece of documentation is relevant to the adjustment of status packet. As you can see, we included photos of our wedding day, once again including a title stating a description plus the date of our marriage. We also again have continued to label every page with the applicant's name and a number. We then included our joint lease for our apartment. You may not have this specifically, so use this just as a guideline of things that you could include as proof of a genuine marriage. However, we decided to include a joint apartment lease, which is in both of our names. We then included a statement from our joint bank account. And you could get a joint bank account or just be added to your sponsor's bank account. USCIS is looking for proof that you have a genuine relationship and marriage, and we wanted to include more evidence than just a marriage certificate, as we felt that the chance of being approved would be greater with more concrete evidence of our genuine relationship. Next, we included a good number of photos of our relationship from various months, labeling the date and description of each, similar to what we submitted for our I-129F K-1 visa packet. We also included around 20 pages of photos. Similarly, we included proof of our travels together, such as boarding passes and travel receipts. Once again, you can include anything relevant to your situation to show that you have a genuine relationship or marriage. And that is all you need for the adjustment of status side of things that you need to submit to USCIS. If you'd like to see how to mail it off to USCIS, then skip towards the end of the video. However, we also decided to file the I-765 form and I-131 form concurrently with our adjustment of status packet. As there is no timeline for the green card to be approved, we wanted to apply for my husband to be able to work in the USA, as well as travel and enter back into the USA. Plus, by filing the I-765 form with the I-485 adjustment of status form meant that we could pay a reduced filing fee. So the next form we completed was the I-765. Again, you can see that we created a title cover page just stating the name of the form, as well as including the applicant's name and a number. Similarly, we included a cover letter for this form, which you're welcome to screenshot and copy once again. Most importantly, we emphasized that we were filing the I-765 application for employment authorization concurrently with Form I-485, as this meant that the filing fee would be $260 instead of the full price. We included the contents of this packet as they appear in order, which I'll show you. We included another G1145 form, which allows e-notification from USCIS that the form has been received. Next is the actual I-765 form, which is thankfully only 7 pages long. This is primarily filled out by the beneficiary applicant. So on page 1, you'll select box 1A, which says that you're wishing to apply for initial permission to accept employment. Then in part 2, you'll enter the beneficiary's information. Page 2 is fairly simple, as it's asking for the same information that you filled out for the previous I-485 form, such as your mailing address and your parents' information. Just remember to include your A number in question 8, And remember to select the married box on question 11, as you're now applying as a married spouse. Feel free to screenshot and copy any other items of this form that you may be struggling with. The left-hand column on page 3 asks for information in regards to your last arrival in the USA, and it will ask for your I-94 arrival number, passport number, and the date and place of your arrival into the USA, which I mentioned how to access previously for the I-485 form. So it is worthwhile filling out this form with your I-485 form on hand. For question 24 and 25, you'll be writing K1 fiance into the blank fields. Question 27 is important as you'll be writing C9 as your category number. For the rest of the boxes on the right-hand column, you can simply write NA. Page 4 simply just asks for you to provide your contact information as well as sign and date the form. Page 5 is asking about interpreter information. So this is irrelevant as you're filling out the form yourself, so you can just write NA in all the boxes. Page 6 is just a continuation of this, and page 7 provides more space and additional information should you need it. Even if you aren't using this page, just remember to write your name and a number on this page. So that's the application complete. So now I'll show you the supporting evidence that we included along with this form. The first page after this form is a copy of the applicant's passport biographic information. Again, we included a title, the applicant's name, as well as his A number. You'll see a lot of the documents that were included are very repetitive. So we simply just printed out multiple copies of certain items. Then you'll need to include a copy of your birth certificate. We then included my husband's social security card. Of course, you may not have applied for this yet, so you don't need to include this if you don't have it. Next is a copy of his I-94 record of entering on a K-1 visa, and then a copy of his K-1 visa with a stamp of admission. Next, we included a copy of our NOAA 2, as well as our NOAA 1, and then we added our K-1 FTP and VC letter. Finally, we included another certified copy of our marriage certificate. So that's the I-765 form complete. And with that form submitted, you should gain authorization to work in the USA before your green card arrives. The third and final application is Form I-131, which again is optional, and this allows you to travel out of the USA and enter back in. We decided to file for this in case there was any reason that we would need to travel to my husband's home country for any sort of emergency. The filing fee for this form is $630, so you may choose not to file for this. And again, this is its own individual form, but requires a lot of the same information that we already filled out previously. The first page is a simple title page. We then included another cover letter for this form stating the name of the form that we're applying for, as well as the supporting documents that we're including along with this filing. Once again, we have another G1145 so that we can receive e-notifications from USCIS that the form has been received. This form is only 5 pages long. So on page 1, you're filling out the beneficiary's information, who is the principal applicant of this form. On question 6, you can write K1 for the class of admission. On page 2, part 2, you're going to check box 1D. I am applying for an advance parole document to allow me to return to the United States after temporary foreign travel. For part 3, question 1, date of intended date of departure, we wrote in case of emergency and wrote 30 days as the expected length of the trip. For everything else, we filled out NA as you can see on this page. Here is page 3 of the form, which you're able to copy. We just selected that we would like the travel document sent to our home address as we filled out previously on this form. And in part 4, we wrote that we would like this travel document for emergency travel. Again, on page 4 was pretty irrelevant, so we filled out NA for all the fields. Part 5 asked for the applicant's signature. So remember to sign this by hand as well as date and include your contact information. We didn't use a preparer, so you can just fill this out as NA. We then included the supporting documents, which I'll run through very quickly, as they are exactly the same supporting documents as the I-765 employment authorization documents. However, this is a separate application, So you will need to include another copy of the supporting documents. So first, we have a copy of the applicant's passport biographic page. Next is a copy of my husband's birth certificate. Then we included his social security card. Next is his I-94 admission record on a K-1 visa. We then included a copy of his K-1 visa with a stamp of admission. We added our NOAA 2, NOAA 1, and K-1 FTP NVC letter too. Finally, we added another certified copy of our marriage certificate. And that's all 3 forms completed along with their supporting documents. We did additionally include an overall cover letter, which we put at the very, very top of our packet. And this was just to act as an introduction to USCIS to say that this is our original submission of the adjustment of status application and that we are filing other forms concurrently along with it. We also mentioned the location and date of the airport which we entered and the date which we got married. Again, feel free to use this template as your own, as it includes all the relevant information that is required by USCIS. So let me walk you through how to include the filing fees for the submission. You can make payments to USCIS by credit card payment. However, we decided to use checks, as from our research, a lot of people were getting denied due to the bank thinking that it was a fraudulent transaction, thus resulting in USCIS in sending back people's application, saying that the payment was declined. This leads to even further delay in processing. So we wrote out 3 checks. USCIS was very specific in their guidelines on how to write out the check, so I'll show you how we wrote ours out. For the I-485 application, you're going to write today's date and write the month, date, and year in this format. It should be made payable to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. This check should be written out for $1,440.00 in numerical form along with the wording as displayed on the screen. In the memo section, you should include the name of the application form that you're submitting. In this case, it's the I-485 form. You should add the applicant's name and a number too. And then this check should be signed. The next check that we submitted was for Form I-765 application, and it should be written out in exactly the same format. However, this should be made payable to the amount of $260.00. The third check for the I-131 application should be made payable to the amount of $630.00. These checks should be placed on top of each corresponding application. In addition, each document should include 2 passport photos of the applicant, i.e. the beneficiary. On the back of each photo, we wrote my husband's name and a number lightly in pencil and put the pair of photos in 3 separate Ziploc bags to avoid them getting lost or damaged. We clipped both the check and the photo to the top of the application. We then put all these documents into one big envelope and mailed it to USCIS via US Postal Service. To locate where you should send your adjustment of status packet depends on which state you're located in. To find out where to mail your application, you're going to go onto the USCIS website and find the lockbox filing location chart for family-based forms. So for example, we mailed our form via US Postal Service to the Chicago lockbox because we're based in Florida. It costs us approximately $15 to mail this off via USPS. I thought I'd mention some useful tips that may help you. Before filing this form, you will need certified copies of your marriage certificate. So I do recommend getting a few copies, as this will always be useful for other tasks, such as changing your name or opening up a joint bank account. It is also worthwhile getting a social security card and number when you've entered the USA. So you can begin applying for US bank cards, get your driver's license, get health insurance, and open any other relevant accounts. Plus, you're then able to include your social security number on these forms that we filled out. Otherwise, you're reliant on USCIS to review your application before a social security card can be issued. I would recommend starting to fill out these forms as soon as possible, even if you haven't entered the US, as it's always worthwhile drafting a copy, as it's a lot to fill out. We started filling out our forms before we were married and left post-it notes on the pages to fill out once we had the relevant information, such as my husband's I-94 arrival record, for example. I would print out multiple copies of some items, such as the G1145 e-notification form or copies of the I-94 arrival document, as a lot of the documents needed are repeated for all 3 applications. However, you will need to submit multiple copies of the supporting evidence, as the 3 different applications may be looked at by 3 different people. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and hopefully I managed to cover most of the adjustment of status submission. Again, this is how we submitted our application, and some aspects may differ based on your circumstances, but I hope it gives you some guidance. As always, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them.